Hi, welcome to the Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, I'm Pastor Chris. Thank you for joining me today. The podcast is a way to introduce you to some of the great people here at Shepherd of the Hills, and we have a lot of great people at the church, school, and child care. Today I'd like to introduce you to someone who is very active in our church. He serves in our audiovisual ministry. He has done many interesting things in his life and in his career, and so I'm looking forward to telling you more about that, including I have some questions about road construction and highways, and he's going to help us to try to understand some of these big enigmas of a big city a little bit better. And so now I'd like to welcome to the podcast Dale Stein Jr. Dale, welcome.
Thank you. After working on these for a year and a half at the shut-ins, I never expected to be here.
Yeah, can you tell a little bit more? What do you do for the shut-ins with these things?
Well, I take the live streams that we now put on the YouTube, and I record them onto CDs and mail your weekly newsletters along with the CDs for the church service.
Yeah.
Then this podcast and Pastor Dan's Sunday school class. I send them 2 CDs every week.
Every week. And how many people does that go out to?
Currently, we are down to only 2.
Oh, okay.
So we started out, I guess, with about 5. But we have reduced it down to 2. Some of them have started watching because we are live streaming now.
Okay.
They've started watching it on YouTube.
Okay.
And unfortunately, others have passed on.
Yeah. Well, thank you for carrying out this very important ministry, making sure that the information is getting to people.
I enjoy it. It's fun.
Great. And you like to do technological things. I remember even for your parents' 70th anniversary, you created a great slideshow, and you seem to enjoy working on projects like that.
Yeah, I'm kind of a history buff.
Okay.
And so I've collected, and not all of them yet, but I'm in the process of collecting all of the slides that my dad has taken through the years, and have put together several of those video slideshows for the families. Each one of my kids, as they graduated from high school, got one of all of their backgrounds and all. And then as they got married, which 3 of them are now, they got one for their wedding that I snuck in some from their partner's family.
Oh, okay.
Coordinated with the in-laws to sneak in some photos that they weren't aware was available anymore.
So you've done that for each of your children, giving them a slideshow like that?
Yes.
What a great gift. Fantastic. Well, I alluded earlier to your parents. Many people know them. They're some of the most respected members in our church, Dale and Helen Stein. And I thought, especially for those who know them, I wanted to ask you, what was it like growing up in the Stein household?
Probably different from anybody else that you could ever think of.
Okay.
As you're familiar in the podcast, you talked to Dad about how dumb it was to jump out of a perfectly good airplane.
Yeah, a lot of times too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, while he was being trained at Fort Benning, that's where I was born.
Okay.
When he was there in jump school.
Okay.
And so all of us, all 4 of us kids, I have 2 brothers and a sister, were born while he was still in the military.
Right.
My sister was born in Japan when his whole unit was shipped over there. Mom was 6 months pregnant and was born while we were there. My other 2 brothers were both born at Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Okay.
3 years apart, though. So we would bounce around all over.
Yeah.
And, I mean, for us, it was just excitement from one day to another. You never knew when or where you were going.
Really?
And we've always kidded that I was fortunate to get out of first grade. I went to 4 different schools in 2 years while I was in the first grade.
Wow. That's
because
a lot.
we moved.
Yeah, that's a lot of change for a little guy.
And so, I mean, it was that way all 20 years that Dad was in the military.
Uh-huh.
And so, but it was also historical and exciting. As I said, we spent 6 months in Japan in 54.
Uh-huh.
So it wasn't that long after the war.
Yeah, it was still pretty fresh.
And then we came back and spent several years here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
But then in 59, we went to Germany.
Okay.
And spent 3 years there.
Okay.
And again, 1959 was only about 15 years after the war.
Yeah.
And there were all kinds of war damage yet still there.
Mm-hmm.
We traveled around a lot
mm-hmm.
and saw all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
The Normandy beaches. We went to Paris one year at Easter.
Oh, neat.
And went to church at one of the big cathedrals there in town.
Cool.
We were able to ride riverboats down the Rhine, go to several castles.
Wow.
You know, with all of the shining armor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Setting in them and all.
Yeah.
You know, it was just all kinds of stuff like that normal kids would have never been able to do.
Wow.
And you hear people, you know, it was so bad that you had to spend so much time in the military with your dad and move around that you didn't get to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
No, you have no idea what we were able to do. And none of the other kids got to go to Japan, got to go to Germany,
mm-hmm.
you know, and see all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of history in those locations when we got there.
Uh-huh.
The Japan trip was the first full unit transfer from the United States to a foreign country.
Oh.
They shipped the men on aircraft. The women and families were flown to San Francisco, where they got on a Navy transport. Spent 2 weeks of no one but wives and kids on this transport.
Wow, what an environment.
And unfortunately for us, with Mom being 6 months pregnant, they said, no, you ain't getting on that boat.
Uh-huh.
We'll fly you over there.
Oh.
So we missed all the fun on the boat with that trip.
It's all right, you got there quicker.
You know? So,
Yeah.
you know, and they started doing that more often to save expense of having to just transfer individuals or a few men. They were transferring the whole units at a time.
Sure. So you got to see a lot.
Yes.
As a result of your dad being in the military. You saw a lot of places, a lot of things. I imagine you developed some of your appreciation for history by seeing a lot of that.
Correct.
I wanted to ask also, just thinking of your parents as people, what were some of the values that they instilled in you as you were growing up?
Well, I can never think of a time, no matter where we were, that on Sundays we didn't go to church.
Really?
I mean, we became not necessarily as active members as we are now, mm-hmm. but every place we went, Dad always found some place for us to go to church.
Mm.
Just like I said when we were in Paris.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't know where to go.
Yeah.
But it was Easter Sunday, and that meant we had to find a church.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was one of the huge old cathedrals.
Yeah.
You know, and no matter where we were, we always went to church. And we always had that in mind, in that we were always required to do things the right way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there wasn't any other way. There was only one way. And that's kind of the military way too.
Uh-huh.
you had to do it the correct way.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and that's just always the way it's been.
Yeah, I can see that. Think about your own career. Now, you served in the military yourself.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your service?
I was one of the last to be should have been drafted. When I turned 19, they drew the numbers out of the fishbowl, and I got my unlucky number.
Okay.
19.
All right.
I was 19 years old. I was born on December 19th, and they gave me number 19 in the draft.
Of course.
And at the time, I was going to Texas Lutheran as a freshman over there. And when I started, they hadn't started drawing numbers yet. They had taken a break. But then during the Christmas break, they started talking about drawing numbers, and they were about 4 away. And so as they got closer, I got, I've already spent 19 years in the military with the Army, and I know what's going to happen if I get drafted. I'll go into the Marines or the Army, and I'll go overseas again to Vietnam. And I didn't have a problem with that, but I just had other things that I wanted to do in my life. And so I went down to talk to the Air Force recruiter, took the exam. But while I was taking the exam, Dad and the recruiter were talking. Found out that the recruiter had been Army Airborne before he switched to Air Force.
Okay.
They knew several people in different units that they had been with. And so they spent the whole time sitting there talking about old times. When I finished my test, I was already signed up.
Oh, okay. They took care of that for you.
Dad had already decided, that this is where you need to be. But as it turned out, it was an enjoyable 4 years. I spent 3 years in Phoenix as a computer repairman for then NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command.
Okay.
We tracked any aircraft in the southwest portion of the United States 100 foot above the ground. And the AWACS now, the big jet, has taken that over now. The ground units are no longer there.
Oh, okay.
But I was also able, while in the military, I took all of my math for college in calculus and differential equations, all of the easy stuff. I was able to take that one class at a time in small numbers to where it was quite a bit of one-on-one teaching with the professors. So I was able to learn it fairly well. And then when I got out of the military, I had the GI Bill then to pay for my school in college when I went up to A&M to get my engineering degree.
Okay. And then you ended up working for TxDOT,
Correct.
right? Texas Department of Transportation. Was that the majority of your career?
Yes.
Okay.
I graduated in December of 79. I started with TxDOT January 3rd, I think, of 1980.
Okay.
And started here in San Antonio. And I had been a structural a structural engineer at A&M, so I was hired as a bridge designer here at the district office and designed bridges for the various expressways in the San Antonio district here, which takes in the 12 counties around Bear. And I worked with in the bridge section for 2 years. Then they transferred me into the road design office to where I was designing total roadways.
Okay.
I worked on the 1604 I-35 interchange, getting all of those bridges laid out to where they were usable.
Over there by the Forum?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. That's a complex interchange, right?
It took a little while because of Randolph, we had some height restrictions with their landing and all over there, so we couldn't really go up any higher.
Oh.
And that's the reason for the tunnels with the roadways going under
Really?
rather than going above.
Because there was a height restriction.
Yes.
See, that's so
Yes.
interesting. I figured there's a story behind every one of these major interchanges, and that helps to explain why things are that way.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So you did 1604 and 35. What were some of the other major ones you've been a part of?
After that, I got a phone call from the district engineer here and was asked to visit him in his office, which is something that no young engineer wants to hear from the boss.
That's not a good thing.
The district engineer would like to see you this afternoon.
Uh-huh.
No,
Okay.
that's not a good deal.
Okay.
But I went in and sat down, and he says, "We have a problem. Bad number 2. So I sat there and listened, and he says, "We need an engineer in Seguin. Do you think you would like that position?" Well, he didn't know that I had gone to Texas Lutheran,
Right.
and Karen also graduated from Texas Lutheran.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started with TxDOT, I told Karen where we could go because I knew I wasn't going to stay in San Antonio.
Uh-huh.
Of the other 7 area offices that we could have gone to, the only one she said she would follow me to was Seguin.
Oh, well, you want her to follow you, so.
So when he asked if I would like to go, I was a little surprised. But he followed that up immediately with, "I know you need to talk to your wife, so I don't need an answer right now.
Mm-hmm.
Come back and see me on Monday."
Mm-hmm.
And as I left, he was playing the Aggie War Hymn, which was a sign to the rest of the office and the rest of the staff that he'd made a new assignment and a new engineer that was leaving the area.
So he played the Aggie War Hymn whenever that happened?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you went over to Seguin?
So we went to Seguin
Okay.
and stayed there 10 years.
Okay.
And after 2 years, I became the area engineer over there. The one that was there retired. So I took his place.
Okay.
Responsible for all construction, design, and maintenance of all the roads there in Guadalupe County.
Ooh, that's a big responsibility.
And so we did a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of it was on farm to markets, but then we also had I-10 running through town or through the county also. And so we did a lot of work on it.
Sure.
After 10 years there in Seguin, then I was asked to come back to San Antonio as the area engineer for the north half of Bexar County.
Okay.
And so my office was still there at Callahan and 410,
Right.
where I had originally started 13 years earlier.
Okay.
And so I came back to where I'd begun. And with that position, I had responsibility for everything north of I-10 US 90 going through downtown. If you connect those, they go straight across Bexar County, and so everything north of that was mine. Everything south of that was another area office they had on the south side of San Antonio.
So north of downtown, you were responsible for the design of the highways?
Design,
That whole area?
construction, and maintenance.
Ooh, that's a lot of responsibility right there.
So,
wow.
Yeah, our office at that time had about a $2 million annual budget
Yeah.
that we were responsible for.
So what was the most difficult situation that you had to deal with in your years in that position?
I guess it would really anything having to do with the expressways.
Okay.
The first project that I had was the 10-410 interchange.
Okay.
They had begun design on it, But since I was a bridge engineer, there were some things there that I felt needed to be modified. The design section that was working on them was headed at that time by an individual who had been there 35 years, so he was still working off of the 60s design patterns, and things had changed. And so once I took over that office, then I started reviewing everything we had underway and started making some modifications to correct some of the areas that I had seen issues with. And the biggest ones were the traffic at the entrance and exit ramps to the main lanes. They were just too close. There wasn't enough gap in between to allow traffic to move to the right to get off, or traffic coming on to move to the left to continue on. And so we started modifying those, and then Austin finally realized what was happening, and that's when they began reversing those ramps. You used to come up with an entrance ramp first and then an exit ramp. Then they reversed it to where you would take the exit ramp first onto the frontage road, then the entrance ramp would come on afterwards. So all of the weaving took place on the frontage roads, not the high-speed main lanes.
That makes sense.
And so that's what they've basically continued and tried to continue in a lot of the expressways now.
What do you think is the most complex highway interchange in the San Antonio area?
There's probably several. The I-10-410 is a regular 4-lane overpass, and I believe it's 5 levels of bridges. You've got the main roadway, and then there's 4 levels of bridges above to make all the connections and all the movements. So you basically every one of your interchange connections like that, crossings, really need that detailed of a interchange. Now, as you're probably well familiar, not every one of them in San Antonio does. I-10-1604 is a good example. It's the old 50s cloverleaf yet.
You got to make that loop. I often will just take the frontage road instead of getting on that thing.
A lot of times that's much quicker than the direct connectors. That is under contract, and here in the next few years it will be under construction to where it will be a full interchange.
Oh, really? They're going to redo that?
From what I'm hearing, yes.
Wow. Do you know what else is under, like what should we be looking for in terms of next major construction?
Most of the work on 1604 from right now, I think it's scheduled from I-10 all the way around to US 90. Should be coming online for an 8 and 10 lane facility.
Really?
Now, of course, that's going to take probably 6 to 8 years of construction in order to get it finished.
Oh boy, get ready for that if you live on that part of town, right?
Yes.
Yikes.
Yes, it's going to be crowded.
Wow. What about 1604 going from, let's say, 10 to 281? Are there any plans are they able to widen that?
They can, but the reason that is number 2 on the list is because once you pass I-10 over there going east towards 281 and 35, you run into the stone cuts. And all of that stone has got to be removed.
So that makes it a lot harder.
And the only thing that you can do to remove that is by blasting it and then digging it out. When I retired with TxDOT, I went to work for the Alamo Regional Mobility Authority, the RMA, the big bad tolling agency. That everybody just loved. We were tasked with widening 1604 from US 90 all the way over to I-35, but there was no money for it. And that's why it was given to the RMA, is because in order to build it, we were going to toll it to pay for it.
Okay.
And with that, it required the interchange at 1604 281
Yeah.
to become a true interchange, to where at that point it was just the frontage roads that would cross. If you wanted to go either direction on either of the roadways,
Right.
you had to get off on the frontage road, go through traffic lights, and then get back on.
Right.
So we decided that since that interchange was the most critically needed, we would start there. And so we designed the south half of the interchange because we had 281, it was expressway going south into town. But it was not expressway, it was still just normal roadway going north.
Right.
So we were going to build it in two halves. And in order to do that, we had to go through and widen the main lane, 1604, down below. And we spent 3 Saturdays blowing it up.
Oh, yeah.
And it was first time I had really worked with explosives like that, and never, in fact, when they said, well, we've got the blast to remove this rock, I said, you can't, you're inside the city limits.
Yeah.
No, I think the fire chief will give us approval.
Okay.
They went and got the permit, and we took it out.
Okay.
But it was really interesting to see, because when they punched the button, the rock only came up about 6 inches, and it was in rows. Every row that they had a line of explosives, it would start at one end and it'd work its way to the other end.
Huh.
And it was just like a wave rolling down the road.
And you were there watching it? That must have been very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me switch gears and come a little more locally here to what's going on at Shepherd. You're on the building committee for the new building,
Yes.
which is such a blessing to have your experience and your perspective there. I feel like we've got an all-star team of lots of different disciplines and backgrounds.
There is.
And you really
There
bring
is.
a lot to the table. And I just want to ask, from your perspective, is there anything that you have learned from this building project that you didn't already know from your experience doing other things?
It's different in that the roadway projects are normally narrow and long. Now, the bridges are steel, concrete, with cranes and everything to build them.
Yeah.
But this is the first real building, per se, that I have worked on. So it's been interesting to see, particularly being a steel building the way this one is, it's been very interesting to see how the steel frames and the decking, the floors and everything go together,
Right.
to where normal buildings are timber.
Oh, okay.
And so it's been very interesting to see how that has gone together.
Mm-hmm. What have you enjoyed the most about being on the building committee?
I guess just now that it's finally going up, seeing the work completed.
Yeah.
You know, the year, unfortunately, with COVID that we sat with no work going on, that was tough.
Yeah. Just looked like a
was
wasteland
tough.
for a while.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And when I was at TxDOT, we had a couple of years to where the economy was way high, and with inflation, and so the cost of our roadways and our supplies were high. Therefore, we had reductions in projects and delays and all, similar to what we're having now because of the COVID. But it wasn't anywhere near as bad as what we've gone through this last year and a half.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think for all of us, it's just been such a different situation.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you most looking forward to when the building's completed? What about that building gets you most excited?
Just being able to use it.
Yeah.
You know, knowing what's being put into it, you know, with a full-size gym, with the Bluetooth scoreboards, and just all the other things that are planned for it, of what we're going to be able to do inside it.
Right.
I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It is. Well, thank you for giving your time to be a part of that committee. I know it does take a lot of time because there's a lot of different discussions that have to happen, lots of decisions that have to be made, curveballs that you have to respond to at times.
Yes.
And so thank you very much for your service on that committee.
Well, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I just wish it was easier and quicker, but I know from construction, there's nothing ever easy or quick.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's true. Well, it'll all get done in God's good time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the committee has been active working with the contractor. Mm-hmm. With our next congregational meeting, we'll be bringing the congregation up to date as to where we are and what effect COVID has had on our schedule and on the cost. Mm-hmm. But we are managing it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the big point that the congregation needs to understand is that we're not on time, but we're still within the budget mm-hmm. that was set initially. And so we're working hard to stay there.
Yeah, you guys are working hard. It's appreciated. Well, thank you so much for this conversation, Dale. It's really great to get to know more of your background and your experiences. So thank you so much for being a part of this today.
You're welcome. I've enjoyed it.
Me too. And thank you so much for watching and listening to the podcast. Please join us next time as we continue to bring some of the great people of Shepherd of the Hills to you to get to know them better. And until next time, the Lord's blessings to you. May He keep you healthy and safe and strong. The peace of the Lord be with you today.